could describe photographer Linda Rutenberg's work, the essence of nature, you do a fantastic job with that. It really is
Thank
very
you.
interesting. So, Linda, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.
And I understand that you started 30 years ago.
Probably closer to 40 years
40
ago.
years, wow, time
Yeah.
flies. Really enjoyed watching was your night photography. It shows how much life you have at night. That it's not just in the daytime where you look at flowers. There are flowers that are in full bloom at night as well. You can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, most people think that the garden goes to sleep or plants go to sleep at night.
Exactly.
And so, yes, it was kind of a revelation that there is a whole other world, a very theatrical world, a lot of pollination that goes on at nighttime. So bats and things of that sort.
Yeah.
So we don't see those things. When I began working with digital photography, I switched over from a film, an analog camera to a digital camera. I decided to do something very different. And prior to that, I'd been working exclusively in black and white and infrared. And so I decided to do work in color when I switched over to digital.
So that's what you mean by you wanted to do something very different.
Yes.
From black and white to color.
Yeah. And I also had been working during the day.
Okay.
So I had always been intrigued by night photography. So I decided to work at night in color. So those were the two sort of big transformations. Those were pretty conscious ones. The nighttime that I was interested in was sort of more down near the docks, in the old city,
right,
in the industrial areas.
Yes. Yeah.
So I would solicit friends.
That takes a little courage, to go in the industrial area at night.
Yeah, it is. So I would try to get somebody to come along with me. It wasn't always possible, but I had my tripod, I had my camera. I would always look over my shoulder and make sure that I was sort of on my own. But it worked out. But that piqued my interest in the nighttime, and I did a lot of reading. When I'm working on a project, I read books that are or fiction that's around the topic. So I read a wonderful book written by Christopher Dudney called Acquainted with the Night. Call from an American magazine called Landscape Architect. And they asked me if I would do work on an article with them, that I would go up to a garden up in Métis, which is in the lower North Shore, to shoot photographs at the Reeford Gardens at the Jardin de Métis. And I had heard about it and I had wanted to go. So I wrote them and I told the director, Alexander Reeford, that I was interested in coming. Ironically, my Mount Royal book and his book on the gardens were on the same page in the Gazette. So there was already a kind of familiarity between us. And basically he took me around the garden and then he said to me, Linda, the nicest time to take pictures in the garden is early in the morning. And I'd be happy to offer you the key to come into the garden early before anybody else. Well, my husband and I had a Volkswagen van and we needed a place to park for the night. So I said to him, well, would you mind if we park in the parking lot, lock us in, and we'll be here early in the morning to take pictures because we don't need anything. We have food, we have our
Instead
beds.
of coming in the morning, you're just stay the night.
I was there, yeah. So he said, sure, absolutely, no problem. And then it occurred to me that I would be spending the night in the garden. So I asked him, well, would you mind if I photograph and walk around at nighttime? So he said, not at all. He says, I'll leave the lights on the main road. Came home and looked at the pictures and I thought, these are beautiful. Like I said, I don't think I've seen something like this ever before. And I went onto the internet looking and I didn't come across anything. Nobody had photographed in a living garden at nighttime.
And it is living, isn't it?
It's definitely living. And I mean, some photographers had taken florals, specimens, and brought them into their studios and photographed them that way. But nobody actually went out. So I basically took that idea and ran with it. I wanted to do some more photography, so I went to the botanical gardens during the Chinese Lantern Festival and photographed there, and then made an appointment with the botanical gardens. They were very fascinated by it and ultimately decided that they would give me an exhibition called After Midnight and allow me to come in over a period of a year whenever I was interested to come in. So I photographed that garden throughout all 4 seasons.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I got I put a list together of about 15 major gardens in Canada and the United States, and contacted all of the directors and told them about my project. And every single one of them said yes.
And you've done them all.
I did them all, and I did them in batches. So I would do like 2-3 gardens at a time.
Okay.
Then I'd come back to Montreal and I would shoot at the garden here. Then I'd go off and do another 2-3 gardens, and I came back and did gardens here. So it was really wonderful. I saw many springs as I sort of started in the south, and as I came up, it was spring, 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 spring. So it was really quite beautiful. That was a very special year. Started working towards a book and an exhibition. So that was great. And it became a 6-year project because
I was just going to say, that's quite the project.
That was the first leg of the project. Then I went to England. My husband was British and his family was still there, so we would go back periodically anyway.
Is that the English garden
That's
at night?
the English garden
That's
at
from
night.
England.
Yes. So that was, and when I went to visit at Kew Gardens, I showed them the book, the first book, and the lady looked at it and she said, "You know, we have 1,500 garden photographers here in England," and she said, "and nobody's worked at nighttime." So I said, "Okay, I want your blood."
Interesting.
Like, you're not allowed to mention this project
amazing,
to anybody. Yeah. So I it was great, and so I worked in England a whole summer.
The one of the I saw one of it's a tulip. It's a white tulip. It's pretty much lost its petals.
I know which one you're talking about.
And I really like that one. Yeah, that was quite nice.
Thank you.
The white is just,
and also
and the contrast is really
part
nice.
of my purpose, and not only showing like what blooms look like, or passageways or gardens look like at nighttime, but to show nature in all its form, because we always think about the perfect moment or the perfect flower, but actually as they're opening up, they're beautiful.
Yes.
And as they, like, I looked in my garden today and all these tulips are already coming up. They need like 2 days of sunshine, and they're already showing their heads, and also after they die, they're quite beautiful too. Like in the Gaspé, the way of life that people have up there, with referencing the sea, or referencing like logging the things that kept them alive. When in the winter those objects would emerge from the snow, and that's what I would photograph. So it was those were traces of their way of life.
Okay.
Yeah, and they become like abstract paintings. A lot of them, like a yellow fishing hut coming out of the white snow in a white sky, things of that sort. So they're almost like Mondrian paintings. I have 2 new projects that I'm working on. One of them is called If Walls Could Speak, probably 50 images at this point, and they're from everywhere. They're from Reykjavik, Iceland. They're from Portugal, Lisbon. They're from Scotland, Edinburgh, Montreal, Toronto. So everywhere I go, I photograph those walls, and it's like a pre-internet language, basically, because it's people putting up messages on walls is a very old. It's an old way of communicating, but it continues. And it seems to be quite universal, because everywhere I go, I find them. Even in Cuba, where it's illegal to put posters up on walls, I found remnants of posters.
I guess back to the cave days, right?
Pretty much. It references the cave communication. Yes. So that's a project that I'm working on, and I'm also working on the forest. It's called Echoes of the Forest, and
you're going to go visit forests, I guess, or?
Well, I'm up north every weekend, so I'm in a forest almost every weekend. And
have you seen the redwoods?
I've been to the redwoods, and I've
never been. What's it like?
Oh my God, they're so huge. It's just quite extraordinary. Yeah, I know. I'd love to go back. The Pacific Northwest, like I was on Vancouver Island, those are amazing forests also. It's a good excuse to go travel, and which my photography always has been anyway.
Yeah.
Whether it's gardens or forests, but no, I want to work on something around climate change, around nature again. I feel like it's very important for me.
Well, Linda, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me here. It's very interesting, the work that you do, and I look forward to maybe down the road doing this again and seeing what other something else about your your forest project. That would be really interesting to do
Okay.
a follow-up on.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure too.
Take care.
Okay.
You can see Linda on YouTube on Art Connects You. Check
Great.
her out.